It is. Obviously it looks different than it did then. And it's been converted to the current owner's use. But this is where all the work was done on bikes. There were motorcycle lifts in here. Number of motorcycles that were in here, parts in the back part of it.
2 victims at the front, 1 in the showroom area, 1 in the shop. What does that say about this crime for the victims' bodies to be scattered so?
Well, basically it says that the persons appeared to be methodical. They came in with a plan and they enacted that plan.
On November 6, 2003, Superbike Motorsports became the focus of a quadruple homicide. A friend of one of the victims found the bodies and called 911.
Okay, what's the problem? Apparently everybody's been shot up here. Everybody's laying down in a pool of blood. His mama's been shot, the mechanic's been shot, and the owner.
Owner Scott Ponder, his mother and secretary Beverly Guy, service manager Brian Lucas, and mechanic Chris Sherbert all gone. In the days and weeks that followed came a sketch of a possible witness and descriptions of a truck and a car spotted in the area.
I know there's somebody out there that knows something, or may not even have anything to do with it, but that probably knows what happened and what's going on, and they don't have to get up and live this hell that we do.
We're not living this just one time. I have 2 boys that I have to explain this to later, and Melissa will eventually have a son that she has to explain it to too. And when you don't have those answers, how can you reassure them that, you know, the world is a safe place? I can't.
It happened November 6, 2003.
Well, it is a mystery that has gone unsolved for more than 8 years.
10 years ago today.
12 years. This morning marks 13 years since that shooting at Superbike Motorsports. You can just imagine it has been a long time coming for the families of the 4 killed in 2003.
We want to talk to you about Superbikes. Would you rather write it out in a statement in your own words, or would you rather...
I'd rather just tell it to you.
You'd rather just tell it to us? Would you rather you tell it to us and us write it out, or you just want to have a conversation and tell it to us? We'll let you pick whichever you want to do.
I don't want to write.
Okay.
I do it for a living. My hands hurt.
Okay. Do you want me to write it out for you?
Sure.
Okay. Now, what I want you to do is tell me from the very beginning about Superbikes.
What led up to it, or
you bought a bike from them?
I bought a motorcycle from them.
What kind of motorcycle?
It was a Suzuki GSX-R 750.
GSX-R 750. Now you're gonna have to bear with me because I write slow. I'm a blind.
So bear with me.
Okay. So you bought a GSX-R 750 from
Superbike Motorsports.
Super.
I got to do the same thing. That's why I don't watch anymore.
Superbike Motorsports.
Yes, sir.
And that's on Perrysburg Road, correct?
I still got the t-shirt.
They give you a t-shirt?
They did. I kept it. I'm not a trophy guy.
You're not a trophy guy? They wanted to give you a trophy?
No, sir. That was actually...
I gotcha.
I don't keep trophies.
So, go ahead. You bought the bike.
Bought the bike. I tried to ride it. Didn't work either way. Key points. Had it 14 days. and it got stolen from the front of the apartment complex. I had actually gone back to them.
Hold on just a second. You said you went back to them?
Before it got stolen, I had gone back to them a few days prior to being stolen and told them that I was having a hard time writing it, and I was not so sure I had made a wise decision.
Before it got stolen?
I thought it was a bad decision. I was trying to see if I could possibly trade it in for a smaller bike or something of that nature. Maybe I didn't know how to ride it.
Okay. What happened?
Please understand this has been many, many years. They proceeded to give me a little on the rude side about my inability to ride that kind of bike. No one ever taught me. So, I mean, I know how to operate the clutch. And the possibility of them coming by at some time with a trailer, and maybe I had to make up my mind. They had dropped it off at the apartment,
okay.
So they knew exactly where it was stored because the guy brought it over to me.
Okay.
2-3 days later, it came up missing. There was a police report. As far as I know, they never found the bike.
You said I made a police report?
I did. Actually, the law enforcement officer made fun of me. He informed me that that's a shame it got stolen before I got a chance to write you a ticket. That was the one time I didn't like you guys.
So you made a police report?
Yes, sir.
And then what happened? Then
insurance came out. I lost a $1,000 deposit because that was my deductible. They paid off the bike, and it was never seen again. Or at least nobody bothered to contact me about it.
okay.
This is part of the story, but I mean, started college, started going to Renewal Tech.
Okay.
None of my credits transferred from my previous degree. Like, none. Okay. Started there, got to Jonesing again for a motorcycle, and started going back to the shop. I was looking at the bikes and trying to let the earlier part go.
Hold on, slow down for a minute. During one of my times there, the owner's friend,
I believe it was the manager. I don't remember the names. They were partners at some point.
You said you think they were partners?
They were, according to the paper, they were best of friends. They went into business together. It was the Brian or something, or I don't remember the names.
You were sitting on bikes?
I was sitting on bikes, talking back and forth, and the manager started making some comments about somebody. I'm going to have to loosely say because I don't remember the whole thing. But basically, great. Now I have something along the lines of we'll have another one to go pick up, and made some comments about the last one being stolen. And he said something about mine was on its way to Florida. I have no idea it was in Florida or why he said that.
Okay.
When he said it was obviously he was not talking about the time. When I asked him about possibly selling it, it was implied that we took your shit. I let it slide for the time being. Got mad about it. Kept going out there. Why I kept going to the same bike place, I don't really know. But I'd go out there, sit on the bikes, and listen to these two talk shit.
Okay.
Bought a Bird 92 FS.
So you drove to...
Or I left college, left my class,
Okay.
drove to Bowling Springs, put the shoulder holster on at the CVS parking lot, and drove to the bike place, the bike shop.
Okay.
Got there. Not everybody was there. Sat on a few bikes, did my usual. Basically stuck for time. And doing my best to make sure that the paying customers were not there. Finally all four showed up. From the sound, it sounded like there was nobody else there.
All four showed. When you say all four?
All four people who worked at the bike store. The mechanic, the mom. I was not going for the mom, but she was there at the time, and she was working there, but she got thrown into it. She wasn't a primary target.
Okay, then what happened?
Sitting on a black Kawasaki Katana, 600 I believe. It's a crap bike.
Okay.
Told him I would take it, at which point the mechanic took the bike to the back to prep it. I cleared that building in under 30 seconds. You guys would have been proud. I'm sorry, but you guys would have been proud. Proceed to go to the back mechanics area where...
Because you use big words.
Walked up, pulled out the Beretta, put the safety off.
So you pulled out the Beretta, and what happened?
Shot the mechanic twice. Downward angle. He was down, crouched down on this side of the bike. Bike was here, I'm on this side. So I had to lean over the bike, and I believe it was two shots.
Keep going, brother.
He hit the ground. When I realized he was not moving, he was not going to proceed. Once I realized that he was no longer a threat, I immediately proceeded towards the front of the building.
Okay.
At that time, all three, that manager, owner, and the mom, they had heard the gunshots in the back and were coming this way to figure out what had happened. By the way, the .38 revolver that she recovered, that's actually my mom's. All of a sudden I had three people in front of me. Mom was the closest, and I shot her 2 to 3 times in the chest. Not my best work. The pattern was horrible. 2. I was actually surprised. 3. And her being there, my pattern was horrible.
In the chest.
She fell. The son and manager, the owner and the manager ran for the door. When that door pathway is here, I engaged the first people here, all three here.
Right.
At this point, these two ran.
Okay.
While they were running, I emptied it and got this guy.
Okay.
Then proceeded to go, did a reload. While this guy was still running, this guy, when I hit him, he crumpled into the doorway.
Okay.
When I did my reload, before this guy got out, I put 2 in him and he actually fell outside. He fell outside, sir.
When you say you got him, you mean you shot him twice, but when he fell out the door.
Yes, sir. His body actually ended up being in the parking lot.
So that was the next sentence. So you dropped the other one before he got to the door, but he fell out the door.
He fell out the door.
Okay. So then what did you do?
Went out to the front parking lot, and I put another round of the vest for him.
Spartanburg County is a large, sprawling piece of land in South Carolina, marked with rolling green hills covered in a wide range of oak and sycamore. It makes for almost ironically picturesque country living. The county was formed in the 1700s and was likely named after the Spartan regiment that fought and won a pivotal battle at Cowpens during the Revolutionary War. Its main city, Spartanburg, is the 12th largest city in South Carolina with just over 37,000 residents. Often called Hub or Junction City, it first earned this title due to the sheer number of trains that passed through the exchange during the expansion era of the United States. Briefly, in the early 2000s, surrounding areas like Boiling Springs, Chesney, and Woodruff were all recognized as part of the Spartanburg metropolis. But now, only locals consider these outskirt hamlets extensions of the city. The modest country homes that sporadically litter the Hub City outskirts are separated by acres of undeveloped flat land and forested hills, many of them littered with countless miles of Prohibition-era bootleg back roads. Sadly, Spartanburg ranks very low on the National Crime Index, a census that rates cities based on their crimes per capita. An almost perpetual battle for unified justice generation over generation built strong roots with old families and even older money. An outlaw mentality was not uncommon. Everyone in the county was at least aware of the problems. However, the degrees of separation in Spartanburg were often less than 3. Don't ask, don't tell applied only to outsiders, and the isms of the heritage-born community were just accepted by locals. All the in-the-open opportunity meant that good people were inevitably going to do bad things at some point. The historically low ranking on the NCI doesn't define Spartanburg, however. Hub City is still ranked as one of the best places to live in all of South Carolina. Home to endless rolling green canopies and picturesque outskirt hamlets rich with American history. The downtown core is a fusion of industrial-era heritage sites and modern innovation. Spartanburg schools are ranked very high, and many notable people were born in or flocked to settle in the pleasantly situated Little Big Town. It's 1947, and NASCAR is officially founded in Daytona Beach, Florida. Born from the post-Prohibition-era desire to continue driving fast cars and do it legally, like most eastern seaboard states, South Carolina already had strong connections to the newly founded association's roots. Tracks, both amateur and pro, started popping up everywhere as the racing craze swept the nation. And Spartanburg, with its overall central location to the NASCAR circuit, earned a new meaning behind Hub City, as many racing camps rushed to set up shop in the upstate community. The racing rush would last for over 2 decades and thoroughly embed racing mentality into Spartanburg culture. Countless backyard dirt tracks, quarter-mile straightaways, semi-pro race rings, and performance shops seemed to overtake the once quiet outskirt flatlands. Spartanburg also briefly had a track in the NASCAR Premier Circuit, the Piedmont Interstate Speedway, and for the next 20 years many racing empires rose and fell on the Spartan soil. However, North Carolina's nearby city of Charlotte would steal the Spartan thunder early in the 70s as it grew into power. A former gold rush town, Charlotte would rise to prominence with the acquisition and merging of two national banks, strongly contributing to the city's growth in the late 70s. As the money poured in, battered and beaten but still highly respected pioneer tracks like the Charlotte Motor Speedway saw steady improvements, like new grandstands and luxury suites, and slowly camps packed up and left for the late boomtown metropolis. Spartanburg would be left with only a handful of the giants it once hosted. Still, for many, race life didn't end when the big dogs left. True Spartans, it simply thinned out transplant competition, and race culture would earn its place in upstate tradition. A bootleg county raised on racing ensured there would be a continual flood of independent tracks and racers to race them, regardless of who was set up where. And track life can be entirely addicting. All the sights, smells, and sounds border on overwhelming, and the heart-pounding adrenaline is not exclusive to the racers. The roar of the engines and rumble at your feet as the metal monstrosities zip by at unnatural speeds. The smell of burning rubber on the tarmac, nose-flaring wisps of green E15, and the pungent familiarity of the communal masses. The experience can't be summarized in a few short sentences. The battle of man and machine against man is truly something you have to see firsthand to fully understand the siren call of the track. The cliches you may think when picturing the scene is likely right on target both on and off the track, and with each generation, the extremities were pushed in parallel to the times. By the 90s, it was all about fast cars, fast bikes, and even faster girls, intense but mostly wholesome pit rivalries, and legendary off-track parties certain to end with up-all-night eyes. In Spartanburg, at least briefly, the subculture stereotypes of rock star racers in the 90s seem to mostly fit. Scott Dean Ponder was raised by his mother Beverly and stepfather Terry Guy. Bev was a loud and outspoken woman, but also notably kind and fiercely protective. She was a born matriarch, and her alpha mentality, coupled with her genuine love for those in her clan, earned her a kind of iconic respect within Spartanburg County. Terry was a hard-working and loving stepfather, and arguably the more stoic of the pair. From a very early age, Scott displayed an almost genius aptitude for engines and a penchant for top speeds, something Bev and Terry recognized immediately. They never questioned Scott's dreams, rather focused on making them come true, cultivating his talent into tenured skill by the time he was a young adult. Bev and Terry would afford Scott a racer's privilege, although he believed in hard work and earned the things he owned and the titles he deserved. He was an aggressive rider, fearless in corners and steady in throttle. Scott quickly earned a reputation as a local legend, even qualifying for a race at the Daytona Motor Speedway in Florida. He had a certain finesse and confidence both on and off the track. His trajectory was obvious, and Spartanburg had his back. Socially, Scott was kind of a charismatic chameleon and awkwardly correct leader. Perhaps a bit of a classic asshole, but it could be argued he earned that privilege, and that it was never quite genuine. People liked Scott and wanted to be around him, and like any local legend would, he ran with larger and larger circles. Eventually, in some groups, trusted with privilege, and perhaps in some cases, a vested interest. Superbike Motorsports started out of Scott's grandmother's backyard in the late 90s, wrenching on bikes. Already a performance bike icon in more than one respect, Scott would quickly upgrade to a small one-garage building in Boiling Springs early in 2001. Together with longtime friend and fellow mechanical savant, Brian Lucas, the two of them found the need to expand their store space again very quickly, and another addition was added along with a dealership deal with Suzuki. As the store grew, Brian's role would transition from part-time in both the front and back to a full-time position spent mainly managing the storefront. Both Brian and Scott were enthusiastic partners and had a genuine desire to get people riding. Their passion and knowledge was infectious, and people flocked to their store. Not overly pushy, with a very real concern for their customers' safety, they acted as consultants and teachers more than salespeople. With this, they both experienced a financial freedom like they'd never seen, Their might one day break even local performance bike shop and garage was quickly becoming a legacy, and both of them were all in. Beverly, Scott's ever-proud mother, became a regular face around the shop. At first, there only as a proud and beaming parent. Her motherly attention to details soon became a store position. Bev took care of the accounting, payroll, cash drops, and other small chores amounting to very big things around the store. Naturally, and almost inevitably, she assumed her role as the store matriarch quickly, and with all three in place, the business was unstoppable, eventually clearing over $100,000 in sales every month. Scott would meet his wife Melissa, a former homecoming queen from Stafford High in Mesa, Arizona, while attending an industry convention in Chicago. The two were an instant couple. Their personalities matched perfectly, and right from the very beginning, both were swept up in the workings of the elusive fairy tale romance. There was no honeymoon stage, or at least it never ended. Their relationship only grew from that blind love beginning, and they would marry quickly. Their focus would shift to children, and with no success, they turned to the medical world for advice. As it were, the two faced a number of medical hurdles, and although frustrated, they were far from defeated, exploring every avenue, eventually seeking medical assistance. October of 2003, and the pair announced Melissa's pregnancy. All the family atmosphere, white-collar success, and track day trophies aren't to say that Superbike and its proprietors came without their share of controversy, at least in the beginning. All that old money and old town mentality meant that not everyone was perfect, all the time. And for those in the spotlight, like Superbike was, this pitfall became even more inevitable. Everyone always wants a piece of the guys at the top, and Superbike was up there with the best. With such a strong and reluctantly accepted criminal underworld in Spartanburg, it's safe to assume Superbike's proprietors perhaps had a black book themselves at some point. Scott and Brian expanded their store again and again. The additions were made out of necessity. Business was strong on all fronts, and with the extra inventory and need for multiple lifts, it also meant they needed to find another mechanic. Chris Sherbert was a young mechanic who was starting to make a name for himself around town as one of those rare savants with an engine. He had worked at a few local garages, but had yet to truly find a home. In a position where they were looking and recognizing Chris's talent with a wrench, Scott approached him and asked him to come join the team. Chris accepted the offer immediately. They had more in common than just a love for performance machines. Their unified understanding of the way things were, and the way they should be in Hub City, was certainly a key metric in Chris leaving the life he led for Superbike. Chris "Shooby" Sherbert was born into an unstable home in January of 1977. Living with his mostly unfit father at first, a loving aunt quickly came to his rescue, took him in, and raised him as her own from her humble homestead in Cowpens, a small Spartanburg community close to Chesney. As a teen, Chris's social circle was generally broad. A part-time wallflower, he was likable, if not a little awkward and quiet. He was a loyal friend to those who were close to him, trusting and perhaps a little vulnerable. The wrong people would quickly recognize these traits, and an impressionable Chris would find an unstable brotherhood as a teen amongst people motivated by all the wrong things. Deeper and deeper as things tend to go, when Scott, Brian, and Beverly welcomed Chris to the Superbike crew, it may have been the escape he had hoped for, and Chris began isolating himself from his former questionable life and dangerous associations. It's 2003 in Spartanburg, and police have long been hoping for a net arrest of key criminal players. With many parallel, ongoing investigations, detectives were relentless, if not also a little reckless and confused. Violent, drug-related crime was at its peak in 2003. A steady swell of unanswered criminal activity gave thugs in Spartanburg a twisted sense of power, and the law could not keep up. The classic picture of power-hungry kingpin overlords directing blindly loyal minions from the seat of drug-fueled paranoia could not have been any more real. The swift and often unpredictable outlaw justice adopted by the criminally minded was out of control, and many of those good people caught doing bad things were lost in the cleansing. Chris, still not quite separate from his former life, was one of those easy targets first arrested at the start of the dragnet, now facing drug charges and serious jail time. It's been heavily suggested that Chris may have been preparing to testify against his former associates. His testimony could have had a major impact on many levels, if this was his intention, something that is not entirely out of reason. For personal safety, the desire to do the right thing, his hearing was set for November 10th, 2003. It was an uncharacteristically balmy November day. Not a cloud in the sky and the sun was beaming. Superbike is open, with Scott on the floor and Bev counting the cash for deposit. Like most days at Superbike, it was a leisurely atmosphere. Predictably busy with just a slight boost in sales, Superbike Motorsports was a verified ticket vendor for the motocross event at Bilo Center in Greenville the next night. A few customers are mulling about the store. One of them, Kelly Sisk, is with his 4-year-old son, making a payment on a go-kart he was buying for his family. Once there, Kelly hung around for a while after making the payment, browsing the shop like anyone would. Scott was on the floor helping a man who was looking at bikes. Sisk recalls he was wearing a heavy jacket, something he thought odd for such a warm November day. "This is a good beginner's bike," Scott told the customer. And Kelly remembers thinking that was probably a lot of bike for someone starting out. But Scott knew his bikes and was notoriously sincere. Kelly didn't think much more of it. The store phone rings and Bev answers. As the conversation goes on, it's apparent she's unhappy with whoever's on the other end. The talking turns to yelling and the conversation abruptly ends with Bev telling him they aren't welcome at the store before slamming the handle back on its cradle. It's now 3 p.m. and Noel Lee has arrived at Superbike to pick up tickets for the motocross. He would later tell police he called the store roughly an hour before to let them know he was coming. Once there, he approached the storefront and strangely saw someone laying in the parking lot. At first, he thinks it might be a prank, but as he draws closer, he can see blood and realizes this was very real. Half under Beverly's Mitsubishi Eclipse is Scott, and wedged in the door was Brian. Strangely, Noel calls his girlfriend, and they have a short conversation before she insists Noel call 911. Now inside, on the phone with responders, Noel sees Beverly lying in a pool of blood. He tells the operator he suspects there's another body, that of Chris Sherbert. The operator tells Noel to wait outside, and later when police arrive, they discover Chris slumped on the floor next to a black Kawasaki Katana 600 FS. There was no drama between Noel and the Superbike crew in the months leading up to the murders. Noel was one of those old friends thoroughly known to police and used to hang around the shop often. It's pure speculation why this relationship fell apart and to what extent, although it seemed to coincide with Superbike and its suggested departure from old habits. Beverly was more than vocal about her distaste for Noel, and it's thought that the angry call the customer heard the day of the murders was in fact between Noel and Beverly, although this has never been confirmed. Noel's own recollection of the afternoon evolved more than once while speaking with police, changing his story to match a safe timeline of events as necessary. Noel would mostly cooperate, however, and was cleared as a suspect relatively quick. Months have passed and detectives have hunted down more than a handful of leads, none of them overly promising, with more than one seemingly focused on a big-picture agenda over a professional analysis of the data available. The media attention the quadruple homicide received only led to the pressure the detectives already felt. The expectation for answers could not have been greater. Both Robin and Melissa were regulars at the station, cooperating with detectives in any way they could. It wasn't uncommon for either of them to be summoned. By now, Melissa has given birth to a baby boy, Scotty Jr., and detectives once again ask her to the station. She obliges, and the interview is nothing more than the usual lip service, going over old details, hoping for new insights, giving reassurances, and this time covertly collecting DNA from a discarded diaper. The widows had willingly given samples at the beginning of the case, routine and simply clerical. Their samples returned what you'd think and were set aside with the rest of the ever-growing discovery and evidence. And then Scotty Jr.'s sample came back. Melissa was called to the station yet again. However, this time police had a much different agenda. They explained how they collected Scotty Jr.'s DNA from a diaper she had thrown out, that the sample had come back, and proved definitively that Brian Lucas was his father, not Scott. Melissa was stunned. Her and Scott had worked hard for the pregnancy. Countless doctors and consultations and eventually medical assistance. Scott and Brian had known each other for years, and the trials endured while trying for conception were no secret amongst the tight-knit families. Police were not convinced. Strangely, Brian had been looking for a house without Robin's knowledge. Detectives suggested this was to be the next step for Brian and Melissa, a final consummation of their twisted love triangle and the new life they were about to live. No one can say for certain why Brian was looking at houses without his wife's knowledge, although a more likely scenario than pushed forward by detectives is that the house was to be a surprise for his family, a larger space they could now afford, and the next step in the legacy Brian had hoped to build. Detectives persisted with this absurd theory for an unreasonable amount of time, until, only by request, the tests were run again. With their tail between their legs, detectives quietly announced they made a mistake. Somewhere along the line, the samples had been mislabeled, and the new results returned nothing suspect. The apology was accepted, and detectives moved on. Continual fresh eyes on an old case, it would be passed through a number of hands over the next decade. Criminal profilers and forensic analysts were enlisted, sent from national agencies to try and crack the notorious upstate murder. Strangely, their findings would be largely dismissed. Spartanburg investigators seemed less than cooperative and more focused on a different agenda than solving the case.
Now investigators are renewing efforts to find the person responsible. News 13's Evan Donovan joins us live from our Greenville News Center to tell us more. And Evan, authorities now think a customer could be responsible for those murders.
Yes, Tammy, but not necessarily a local customer. Investigators with the Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office have been working with state and federal agencies to develop a list of online customers of Superbike Motorsports from a year or two before the murders took place. Now, we have a composite sketch of a man that they think could be responsible for these murders. They've combined that information with a poster of possible suspect vehicles, and they've sent this all around the country, specifically to media outlets in towns where possible customers or previous customers of Superbike Motorsports actually lived. Investigators say that the robbery was not the motive for this crime. They say that the person who did this was definitely out for murder.
The nature of this crime was, like a lot of murders, it's very brutal. The person who did this certainly wanted each and every individual in that shop to be dead, and they went to pretty good lengths to make sure that that happened.
Just a few minutes ago at Cleveland Park in Spartanburg, family and friends of the victims gathered together for a memorial service for the 10th anniversary of the murders. Investigator Alan Wood, who you heard from there, says that he's hoping this renewed focus will generate some more leads. He said that certain crimes stick with you and that in his line of work, The only thing worse than murder is an unsolved murder. Reporting live from the Greenville News Center, I'm Evan Donovan, News 13.
4 pictures and 13 years of wonder.
We found out today what I'm about to tell you.
But now the wondering is over, and video of crime scene tape strewn across a motorcycle repair shop in Chesney is being replayed.
We signed 4 warrants on Todd Kohlhepp today with a confession that he did this crime.
As deputies walk Todd Kohlhepp over his 100 acres, the sheriff's office says he confessed to killing Chris Sherbert, Scott Ponder, Brian Lucas, and Beverly Guy.
Can't even imagine what the victims' families have been going through. I can't.
Those family members still in shock over the news from deputies that Todd Kohlhepp was a Superbike customer in 2003 and that he took away a chance for 4 people to see their loved ones again.
All this unraveling, 8 miles down the road and come out 13 years later that someone 10 miles up the road the other way, my brother was killed by the same person.
That he's been walking in our community all these years?
All these years.
We're overwhelmed right now and super just grateful.
The widow of a Superbike murder victim was among a group of families scarred by violence attending a vigil tonight.
The Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office held that candlelight service to help these people who are united by their pain. 7 News reporter Nicole Smith was there. She's joining us tonight with more.
Well, Amy, this was Melissa Ponder's first time back in Spartanburg since Todd Kohlhepp confessed to killing her husband and 3 other people at Superbike Motorsports in Chesney 13 years ago. The people inside Spartanburg's Morningside Baptist Church tonight share a common bond.
I walked into a home and found 4 of our family members dead.
They're the families whose lives were shattered by violence and tragedy. This is the 26th year that chaplains and victim advocates with the Sheriff's Office have held the candlelight service.
Sitting here listening to the things that these people had to say, and it meant a lot.
Among the audience, the widow and son of Scott Ponder, who was killed at Superbike Motorsports 13 years ago.
I would say for 30 minutes, just shock.
Shock when she learned Todd Kohlhepp confessed to killing her husband.
I almost feel sorry for him. He's done something that is so irreversible. He's done something that cannot be changed.
Families of Kohlhepp's other alleged victims were also at tonight's service.
I wanted to see all the family here that found out the news too.
Kohlhepp's mom told 7 News her son says he felt he was embarrassed by the Superbike victims and that's why he killed them. It's something Ponder says she can't understand.
I can see Scott and I can see Brian laughing and joking, but not one time could I ever picture them belittling someone or making them feel less than what they were. And that right there tells me that he, Todd, couldn't have been in his right mind.
Ponder says she's not sure if she can say confession means closure, but it does bring her peace. She says she is considering filing a wrongful death lawsuit.
I want other people to know that as low and dark as things may seem for them, there's a light and it'll come. It's different for everybody.
Kohlhepp was sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to 7 murders. He killed Beverly Guy, Scott Ponder, Brian Lucas, and Chris Sherbert at Superbike Motorsports back in 2003. Later, he killed Johnny and Megan Coxey and Charlie Carver. And today, Carver's parents and Ponder's widow and son took the stand. Fox Carolina's Brooklyn Cromer, she has been following this story since 2006. She's live outside the courtroom in Brooklyn. Did Kohlhepp have anything to say to these folks in court?
Well, he stayed pretty quiet throughout most of the hearing until the very end. He motioned for Carver's attorney to walk over to him, so he then whispered a message into his ear. Now, we couldn't hear what he said, but after the hearing, I talked to Carver's dad, and he said he just wanted to let them know he was sorry for what he did to his son.
Thank you once again for watching or listening. and thank you for your patience while this episode completed. During the production of this series, more than one gracious viewer has reached out with first-hand perspective that has both helped mold and deconstruct my narrative. Not everyone wished to be mentioned, but I'm grateful for you all. Michelle McMahon, thank you so much. Our conversations had a great effect on the overall episode. Like this channel, my Patreon seems to keep growing, and I'm truly humbled. As my channel stays largely demonetized through YouTube, these small cumulative contributions have helped the channel in more ways than just equipment upgrades, and I couldn't be more grateful. I've been fairly confident with name pronunciations up until now, but I apologize if I get one or two wrong. James Harrington, A.K., Carmel Perolia, Jane Agoglia, Germbot's Wifey, Judy Alford, Idlebaum, Reginald Dunlop, Lisa Nugent, Dan Armstrong, Chase Southwood, Yolita, Dave Komarek, Thomas Andreas Giotopoulos, Jenny, Amanda Atkinson. Thank you all, truly. One last mention that definitely needs to be made. They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but in this case, it was just plagiarism. I won't make this a big deal, but I'm entirely grateful for the heads up and think you deserve a mention. J-Rock, you rock. Thank you for your keen eye. In part 3 and conclusion of the Todd Kohlhepp Trilogy, we'll take a look at Johnny Joe and Megan Coxey, their tragically similar Sid and Nancy tale of good intentions obscured by the smoke of a dragon. Caught at the peak of their turmoil with a baby taken by the system, both of them recently arrested and released, broke and addicted, no one seemed to notice when they simply disappeared. 1 year later, and Charlie Carver and Kayla Brown were reported missing after they failed to return home after doing work for a realtor in Woodruff. Months later, Concerned Mount says Charlie's Facebook suddenly goes active, posting a series of strange and morbid messages that confuse everyone. We will take a deep look at all that remains, Todd's ultimate capture and confession, and continued strange aftermath in the conclusion of the Todd Kohlhepp Trilogy with Something Criminal.